introduce our speaker for this afternoon. And I have to say that she's a recipient of the World Prize Foundation. Sometimes we popularly call it as the Norman Borlaug Foundation. And it's indeed a pleasure to have a very talented young scientist to be. And I have to say that it's a privilege for ICRISAT to be hosting for the third time this World Prize Foundation Fellowship. And I have to say that ICRISAT is indeed making an impact because the two previous alumnus are now enrolled in very prestigious universities in the United States. So she's indeed, as I said, young. She's just high school. She's from Geneseo High School of Illinois, United States. And she's barely 17, turning to be 18 in September. Okay, I did my research. And okay, without much ado, she's also mentored by a very prominent scientist of ICRISAT under the person of Dr. Cynthia Bantilan, and with very good learning support enrichment by equally young scientists Kavita and Padmaja. And so, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Rachel Ganson, who will be presenting self-help groups as a platform to improve nutritional status, insights from village Aurepalle. I was also owed this afternoon because she has indeed imbibed also the cultural diversity of India. As you can see, she's wearing a sari. Okay, Rachel?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Dr. Mullah for that very kind and generous introduction. And I guess I should say thank you to Ripsha for allowing me to embody Indian culture. I wouldn't have been able to do it without her, quite literally. So okay.
The red one.
Oh, the red one? Okay, got it. Okay, so as Dr. Mullah said, it is self-help groups as a platform for improving nutritional status, and the focus of the study was in village Aurepalle. So, okay. This is my background, which I put in before Dr. Mullah introduced me. And I would just like to reiterate that I was very fortunate to work under Dr. Bantilan, conducting nutrition and gender development studies. So I began this internship with a literature review, beginning with Village and Household Economies in India's Semi-Arid Tropics, a title which I'm sure is familiar to all of you. And basically what I learned from it the most was that improved nutrition will ultimately reduce child mortality, increase life expectancy, enable educational achievement, maintain productivity, and ensure mobility, which ultimately results in sustained income earning opportunities, decreased fertility, and decreased population growth. This is what initially perked my interest in studying female income. In Walker and Ryan, they cite Syphilius Rothschild 1980 as suggesting that a mother's income has more impact on household nutrition than total household income. And so as SHGs are a venue for increasing female income and female empowerment in general, this is how I decided upon the subject of my study. These are just a few other titles that I went through that helped me form the hypotheses that I have here. My general hypothesis: female participation in self-help groups will enhance the nutritional status of the household, and from those, involvement in SHGs will increase the consumption frequency of healthy, nutritious foods in the household diets. Anthropometric measurements taken for all households will show an increase in normal ranges of nutritional status among SHG households, and participation in SHGs provides more access to information on nutrition. From these hypotheses, I came up with the following objectives. The main question is, does participation in self-help groups improve the nutritional status of the household? And from those in self-help group households, are more nutritious foods consumed more consistently when compared to non-self-help group households? Does anthropometric data quantitatively show an increase in nutritional status for a SHG household as opposed to non-SHG households? And do SHGs provide information to members on accessible resources that can improve nutritional status? This is a brief study outline, and I would like to emphasize the in-house discussions. Because of my short time period here, I really had to rely on the vast knowledge of Kavita, Padmaja, and Dr. Bantolin to guide my research, to guide my results, and to ultimately guide my conclusions, so they were invaluable to me. My methodology, as I said, this study is in Aurepalle village because it has the highest self-help group participation rate, so I wanted to make sure that I would be able to find self-help group participants. However, because of this, there was a low participation rate of non-self-help group participants, which somewhat skewed the results a little bit, which is definitely a limitation. Other limitations I would like to point out are the time I was allotted, the availability of interviewees, as this is a busy period in the fields and it was difficult to find women who were willing to stop their work and conduct an interview with me, and also the language barrier, words that didn't translate, the translator, and I occasionally had communication issues when I needed to ask a question or when I was trying to receive an answer. Self-help groups in Aurepalle village. This is a picture of the first self-help group I conducted during my stay there. And as you can see in the far right-hand picture, I literally had to go to the field sometimes to conduct the interviews, and even then women were rather reluctant to conduct them because they were busy in the fields. The rise of self-help groups in Aurepalle, it's a microfinancial institution with 12 and 15 members. They receive bank loans with low interest rates, about 3% in Aurepalle. And you can see how information is shared among the self-help groups. And also self-help groups, as everybody knows, is a major tool for empowerment of women. I had a great video of public speaking skills, however, it's not playing anymore. So you can, but in the video, it just showed all the women who are so eager to talk, so eager to share their opinions. It was really inspiring to know that they weren't scared anymore of what other people thought about what they had to say. As I said, it's a tool for empowerment of women. These are just other results of self-help groups' empowerment of women. The reason for joining the SHG is mainly for the monthly savings, the low interest rates from bank loans, and as you can see, there are also other reasons, such as the 60 age and over government pension scheme, school scholarships, and gas connections, which aren't necessarily related to the main idea of self-help groups, which comes in later in my results. The reasons for not joining SHG are primarily they were too poor or they haven't been asked. The fact that they haven't been asked and therefore haven't sought out to join an SHG, I think, indicates very strongly the social aspect of self-help groups. And the encouragers of self-help groups are, by and large, neighbors. Neighbors will be an overarching theme in this study as a way of disseminating information and socially interacting with each other. Nutrition, the first objective and hypothesis. This is one of the ICRISAT wells that has been dug in, or that has been implemented in Aurepalle village, and I got up in the morning and everybody was at that ICRISAT water source, which is just one example of how things can drastically change, because before they were having severe water issues in Aurepalle. So the changes in food habits. Before we begin, I would like to say that because of the small sample size, the percentages are out of the total number taken, or total number of samples taken, which is 14. So as you see with sorghum, it's 42.9% of the people who listed sorghum as a food item that was more commonly consumed 30 years ago are in self-help groups. Not necessarily 42.9% of the people in self-help groups answered that question. So from here, I'd like to emphasize that sorghum and pearl millet were most commonly consumed 30 years ago, And this is a comparison of 30 years ago to now, not necessarily a comparison of self-help groups and non-self-help groups. And here we can see the food items that are consumed now. So they say that there's been an increase in rice and breads, buns, biscuits, vegetables, green leafy vegetables, and non-vegetarian food, and wheat. Some inferences is that there is definitely an increase in ready-mades, so wheat, buns, breads, biscuits, other processed goods. Rice has also become the main staple grain of all households in Aurepalle, and they did point out during my interviews and focus group discussions that there was, they felt like previously they consumed healthier foods. They were organic foods, local varieties, and that they feel like now there is a change in quality because of the adoption of higher yield crops. Specifically, they pointed out BPT rice as it's more commonly used now, except they feel that the longer, thinner grain has less nutritional value, and so they don't like to eat it as much. And so even though now there's more diversity, they feel weaker and they feel less able to perform the tasks that they used to. Household consumption, these are the most commonly consumed foods in the household. So even though sorghum was previously consumed at a higher rate 30 years ago, it is still one of the main food items consumed today. And also green leafy vegetables and rice and milk, I'd like to point out as being in very high consumption in the households. The frequency of food item consumption in the households. This is specifically in SHG households, and this is by how often they were consumed, so always 6 to 7 times a week, usually 3 to 5 times a week, sometimes 1 to 2 times a week, and rarely 1 to 3 times a month. This is in non-SHG households, because I know it's difficult to compare the two graphs in different slides. Some inferences that can be made after comparing the two graphs is that more frequently consumed foods in SHG households were non-vegetarian food, sorghum, pigeon pea, green leafy vegetables, pearl millet, other pulses, and milk. And there is definitely a higher consumption of nutritionally rich foods, especially green leafy vegetables in self-help group households. And in non-self-help group households, there's a higher consumption of fruit, wheat, and vegetables. The fruit and vegetable consumption in the households, as you can see, self-help groups tended to consume a wider variety of foods. The only food listed by non-self-help groups that was not also listed as being consumed in self-help group households is pomegranates. And also more of the respondents who listed a wider variety of foods were in the self-help group households. Home production is important to consider because if you home produce the food, you're more likely to eat the food, whereas if it's a cash crop, you're going to want to sell it to bring income, and then you have to go out and pay for your food. So if it's already available, you're more likely to consume that food. So here we can see the home production comparison between self-help group and non-self-help group households. Rice in particular is more frequently produced in self-help group households, as well as pigeon pea, cowpea, and sorghum, which are other cereals and pulses that have a high health content or nutrition content. And so that indicates that those self-help group households are more likely to eat those foods, increasing their nutritional status. Home production, also I would like to point out how much is consumed or how much is home produced. By and far, self-help groups produce at least half. Many of them produce more than half of their own food on their own, whereas non-self-help groups produce almost none. And the amount spent purchasing food that is not grown at home, self-help group households, even though they produce much of the food on their own, they're also able to spend 5,000 rupees a month, 4,000 rupees a month, 3,000 rupees a month purchasing food, which may indicate the fact that they are able to buy more foods outside of what they produce on their own. If non-self-help group households don't produce a lot of food on their own, and they're also not able to spend as much money on their own buying food, then this might indicate a lack of nutritional intake, their inability to purchase healthy foods. The most costly household expenditures, this is not what is the most costly. It is just what was listed as being one of the most costly. And you see that the highest percentage of people listed consumption as being one of the most costly household expenditures, which is slightly disconcerting because of the lack of concern they have for nutrition, even though it's obviously one of the things that they put the highest input into, followed also by agriculture and education. And education, as you can see, self-help group households tended to put more into education than non-self-help group households. Household concerns, the most concerning issues to the household were agriculture. As you can see, none of the participants listed nutrition, consumption as being an issue. And like I said, it's kind of disconcerting to know that it's not such a big issue, even though they feel weaker, they feel like they're not consuming as nutritious meals as they were before. And many people felt like self-help groups would or do help with this issue. The three that listed that they did not feel like it helped with this issue, 2 of them were in self-help groups but had not participated for a long enough time period for them to see any change. One of them was too poor for the small self-help group loans to make an impact in their household, they felt. Anthropometric measurements, again, I would like to comment on the limitations because there was such a high participation rate in self-help groups, which is completely awesome. I think that's so great in Aurepalle. However, it was very difficult for my study because it was hard to find non-self-help group participants, which really skewed the results. So in my conclusions, I apologize for that graph, something must have happened, but in my conclusions, it means I'm not able to really make educated conclusions because of the skewed results. So this is what the numbers turned out to be in percentages. And as you can see below, those are the World Health Organization's classifications for BMI. And even though I know it's difficult to tell with the way the graph is, but it appears that the normal ranges for both are similar. You see here that the numbers are drastically different. So, and in the self-help groups, there's more of a spread of where people lie in BMI classification. Nobody in non-self-help groups is pre-obese or obese. They all are either normal or fall under the normal category. Under 5 measurements for height, weight, arm circumference are also very difficult to calculate, but I put them up here just so that you all know that I did try to find some qualitative data to support my reasoning. However, because of the location of the study, it was not possible. Finally, information sharing, comparing information sharing between self-help group and non-self-help group members. Information sharing is very important among SHGs and also very important when you are trying to disseminate nutritional information. As you can see, the most important types of information shared in SHGs is agricultural information, bank transaction information, public speaking skills, and then the no information given category was there because, okay, let me look at my notes, because one of them, they had just started the group, so they were focused on raising enough money to receive the loan. The other one had only been to 1 meeting so far, so she was involved in a self-help group, but she hadn't been to enough meetings to feel like she had received information from them. Sources of information in non-SHGs, by and far it's the neighbors again. Like I said, this would be an overarching theme. Neighbors are definitely a main way that information is shared among villagers. And even though there's a doctor in the village, and I met with a doctor, it's not, the people don't go to the doctor necessarily to receive the information always. It's more shared between neighbors. And here I think it's important to show how much more open self-help group members are to receiving information. Non-self-help group members tended to be a little bit more on the conservative side, but self-help group members were definitely more open to receiving information. The benefits of green leafy vegetables when asked, 35.7% of the people who listed increasing iron as a benefit were in self-help groups, 21.4% were not. As you can see, nobody listed increases calcium or increases potassium, and there were varying numbers for increasing vitamin C, improving eyesight, and don't know. None of the people who listed increasing vitamin C could label vitamin C. They just listed vitamins. And then for increases iron, almost everybody just listed that it increases your blood or the amount of blood that you have. No, very few people were actually able to identify the iron count. Nutritional information, more of it is that green leafy vegetables, non-vegetarian food, pulses, and vegetables. The green leafy vegetables are more frequently consumed or were listed as the best way to obtain protein by self-help groups. About an equal number listed pulses, non-vegetarian food, more non-self-help group members listed, and then vegetables, more non-self-help group members listed vegetables as being a way of obtaining protein in the diet. And then the source of this information was, again, primarily from neighbors. Doctors took a backseat again. Indicating the level of nutrition concern among villagers, the number of respondents who were content with the information sharing in self-help groups. There was a mix-up in the graph. It was supposed to be 100% were content with the information, and 100% were also content, but nobody found that, and everybody found that information sharing was beneficial. So it's kind of a little bit two-sided, is that everybody's happy with the amount of information they have, but everybody finds the information they receive beneficial. So I think it indicates that people don't know what they're supposed to look for when they're searching for information. They take what's given to them and they're happy for what's given to them. They don't know what to look for on their own. Conclusions and recommendations. On nutrition, quality is a concern for them. This could indicate a lack of knowledge on their part or a lack of or incorrect adoption of technology. Rise in popularity of ready-made products, wheat, flour, buns, breads, biscuits, etc. It's less time consuming. Now they're able to cook 2 times a day, whereas before they were only able to cook 1 time a day. However, if you're going to cook 2 times a day and you're busy with field work and busy with the children, busy with the housework, you're going to need foods that are easy to prepare. So there's a rise in ready-made products. Also, they're more socially popular, especially among the young children. They want the breads, they want the biscuits, they don't want to eat the traditional food. It's become somewhat of a social taboo. There's also a rise in consumption of rice, wheat, vegetables, and green leafy vegetables. Farmers want cash, so there's less consumption or less production of ICRISAT mandate crops because farmers are turning towards more cash crops such as cotton and other things. They have begun selling the milk that they home produce because they want the money. They're not necessarily interested in consuming what they produce. Self-help group households. They more frequently consume sorghum, pigeon pea, pulses, pearl millet, non-vegetarian food, and green leafy vegetables. And there's much less consumption of wheat among households, which means that there's possibly more information being shared about the benefits of the varieties of food that will increase their nutrition. But both self-help group and non-self-help groups have a decrease in cereals overall compared to 30 years ago, and also an increase in ready-made goods. And like I said multiple times, there's a lack of concern over nutrition. The anthropometric measurements were, we were unable to make informed conclusions due to the sample size. The neighbors are the main source of information when it comes to sharing information among villagers. Self-help group members are more open to information, but everybody overall lacks concern regarding nutrition. Adoption occurs collectively, which is supported by gender and social capital mediated technology adoption. That report where they proved that ground-up production farmers adopted the technology more successfully when it was done collectively. And this was also supported in my own findings with focus group discussions, and you can see from the high respondents who say that neighbors share information. And I'm going to go into a little theory I like to call women will talk. When I was in the village, one of the ladies said, you know, you put women together, we're going to discuss what's going on in the household, what's going on socially, what's going on in the fields. Women will talk to each other if you put them together. So if you have information, if you give it to groups, they learn together, they collectively adopt, they open discussions of problems and solutions together, ultimately leading to successful information adoption. If you give it to individuals, on the other hand, they doubt the information, they're unsure of its usefulness, they're non-comprehensively attempting to adopt the information. Ultimately, there's a failure. So if you understand that self-help groups, they empower women, they give them public speaking skills, expanded knowledge, and increased influence, then you can conclude that the groups will receive the information, they'll learn it together. They will collectively take action, they'll adopt it together, talk about what's going on, talk about problems that they're having, solutions to those problems. They share that information with their neighbors and relatives, and then ultimately successful adoption will take place. So if you pinpoint self-help groups as a way of empowering women, which it obviously does, you can there justify giving them nutritional information and understanding that it will be successfully adopted. So individuals will ultimately unsuccessfully adopt the technology. And self-help groups will ultimately lead to collective action and successful adoption, which will lead to more smiles. My final slide on recommendations is to increase the study depth. I think that there's a lot of potential for this study. I wish I would have been able to do more with it. So my recommendations would be to compare this village with another village of lower SHD participation, increase the sample size, measure the daily caloric intake, and go outside the VLS sample size. Promote home production, provide incentives for consumption of cereal grains other than rice. Right now, rice is given as a subsidy. If other cereal grains could also be given as a subsidy, it may increase the likelihood of people to purchase that. Teach them not just how to improve their nutrition, but why it's important. We really need to raise concern over the nutritional status of these people. And use SHGs to disseminate nutritional information. Pinpoint SHG members, teach empowered women why nutrition should be a concern, and effectively promote collective action and adoption. So I would just like to say thank you for all of you for coming out, for taking your time. I would like to give a special thank you. Have everybody written down? The World Food Prize and ICRISAT, Lisa Fleming, Dr. Bantalin, Dr. Mula especially for just giving me such a wonderful opportunity. As a 17-year-old, I would have never imagined myself a few years ago being in this position. I would also like to thank Padmaja and Kavita for, they were super busy, and yet they made time to help me, and I appreciate it so much, and I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without them. I would like to thank Amran Reddy, the live-in village reporter for Aurepalle, for taking me around and really adopting me into his family for a few days and being so kind. The Markets, Institutions, and Policies Department, especially Mohan Rao for visiting Aurepalle village with us for a day, and Padmini for helping me set everything up and just stay organized and keeping me in contact with Dr. Mula and everything that I needed to do. The interns, some of which are here, some of which have left already, thank you guys for keeping me sane. And finally, for my family and friends, it was 4:45 a.m. when I started this presentation, and they got up to watch it. And I told them they didn't have to, but they're like, no, we'll watch it. So I'm especially thankful to them for being such great supporters throughout all of this, even though they're thousands of miles away. So I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. Dhanyavad. So thank you very much.
Rachel, and the floor is now open for questions.
Briefly, I would like to apologize ahead of time. I am going to restate the questions so that the people who are watching the webcast can hear the questions. So I'm not just repeating it because I can't hear you. I was instructed to do so.
Yeah, so Rachel, thank you very much. I enjoyed that. I have one comment and a question. I mean, one comment is that if you know the other attributes about the women in the self-help groups, such as their family size, you can probably do more with your limited sample size by other quantitative data. But my comment is you say that nutrition is important and they should be concerned. But I would put it to you, in our own countries, mine is Europe and yours is America, we're flooded with information about nutrition and health. We completely ignore it. So why actually do we think that whether it's women or anyone else who's poor should be concerned about their health? Because we choose to ignore all the information that we have.
The question is, why should women in these countries be concerned with nutrition when in developed countries in Europe and America, for example, have a flood of information, we choose to ignore it? I guess to that I would say that the fact is that it's available to us. It's not something that we're ignorant about. So we understand that nutrition is important. We personally choose to ignore it. I think the difference is that these women might not, I'm not saying they don't, but they might not completely understand why certain things are important to know. We understand the importance of nutrition and we understand how to go about finding information on nutrition if we're interested. These women don't have those resources, so we need to make sure that they're available to them.
Rachel, first congratulations for speaking very eloquently. It was within this short period of time you have achieved a lot. It is a pleasant surprise and a happy occasion. One thing, while you have not been able to see that this SHG members, in terms of this child nutrition and health condition, this non-SHG. Might be relying on the fact that whom you found that non-SHG, they are in the better endowed situation in the society in terms of earning, then family assets, then home production, things which they are consuming compared to those self-help group members. Because usually the self-help group members are those who are poor in the society. So it's like comparing a person who is sick and another person who is healthy, then saying that even taking medication is poorer, that a health condition was poorer than a healthy person. So if it is this same level of this income as mentioned by Peter, as well as this other home production of those different consumable items, then a SHG member and non-SHG member, then my hypothesis is that SHG member compared to a non-SHG member.
Okay.
So if it is possible from this data which we have made available to you, that this body mass index of this children of this same categories of this economic status and being a SHG member and non.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel, first of all, thank you for this very nice presentation. I mean, you've really done a good job, and for just in high school, I really congratulate you. I don't think I could have done that at that time. So one comment, and I just have a comment. I think it maybe Uttam and I understood differently because what he commented on contradicts what I'm saying. What I understood from the presentation is that the non-SHG members are poorer, seem to be more poorer. So, I mean, to me, it looks like maybe that's why, the nutrition, they don't know about it, because it's more, maybe we should look at who has captured the SSGs. Is it the richer or that's what it looks like to me. So maybe that's another angle. I mean, not you because you're finished, but we could look at. And the other thing is, again, as you said, I mean, I'd really like to thank you that in your short field visit, you took out that just because they have the money doesn't mean the nutritional standards go up. And so many researchers who are seasoned researchers still make this, like blanket statement that income has gone up, so the nutritional standard has gone. So I really thank and I really commend that you did that.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just like to comment, I have the income levels. When I was doing my research, we tried to we tried to include various people from different land sizes, but the income levels varied. So I will definitely go back and maybe take a look at that and see if there's anything that would indicate further research should be done on that. So thank you both for those comments.
I get another one? So just following what Chanda said, I mean, I was struck by the same thing, and I wonder if the women recognise that what they eat today is not as interesting, not as nutritionally good. Is it just peer pressure, or is it that they are busier today than their parents were, and therefore can't invest the time? Because it's slightly contradictory. If you recognise that you're eating less nutrition, you have more money, then where does the...
Okay.
Maybe I'll just...
No, you should let Rachel answer.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see if I'll have the same thing to say. The question is, correct me if I get this incorrect, but is it contradict? Why do women who understand they are eating less nutritious food but have higher incomes choose to consume the less nutritious foods? Correct?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. So I guess that again goes back to the fact that maybe there's not information that they have on how to correctly consume nutritious foods. I'm not exactly sure which slide it is, but it was the one where it was the best way to obtain protein in the diet. None of the women I surveyed listed, for example, the combination of pulses and cereals that you need to obtain the same amount of protein as non-vegetarian food, which I think indicates a lack of knowledge in that area. So, I mean, I think they're trying, but maybe they just don't understand. And also, they said that when they get more money, they like to buy saris and they like to buy jewelry and they like to spend it on festivals and things like that. So I understand what you're saying about it possibly being social, because now they have the money, they might want to be able to show that they have the money to the other people in the area.
Maybe just, especially with the milk, earlier they used to consume all the milk that is produced at home because of the milk collection center that is given. That's just an example to show that they're consuming less. And the comment on the saris, the women said earlier the husband used to bring whatever clothes they wanted and they had to wear this, but now they are buying the clothes for their husband. So
Yes.
now we buy what we want. So the interests are changing now.
I think one observation is that this expansion of this ready-made foods in the villages, which are less nutritious, is because of this expansion of it's a social peer pressure in a negative way. If your child as a rich person can afford, poor person if it does not have that one, why it goes. So it happens that this is going in a vicious circle rather than a virtuous circle.
They say we get Maggi noodles as breakfast for our children. They think that's very nutritious, but it's such a
I thought McDonald's was good for them.
We have Madhu raising his hand.
This taste and preference is a complex issue. Like it is not only the knowledge is one part, but also the convenience factor also. That both factor has to be factored out. Like here I saw in our canteen, all we are knowledgeable. When there's a moonbeam sprout there, hardly any people eat. But I can get that. Very nutritious, but hardly we eat that. So like our Bajra thing roti, hardly we get here. So it's not only the knowledgeable, this thing there, the social pressure. It's a very taste and preference, very complex factor. We don't eat here also with our Bajra because it's like difficult to make the brain those things. So it is a complex social taste preference how to change. So we cannot think just one point. There is no knowledge or this thing. It's a factor that we need to address.
We need to take less nutritious food because they consume so lot. Quantity is much higher.
Because this one I noticed here, particularly when like the movement is sprout, even last time nobody did that. There are few still remain. But this is very, very nutritious that is sprout.
And yes, I would also like to comment when we were discussing in the focus group why there's a higher consumption of processed foods. Like again, I would just like to briefly reiterate, now they cook 2 times a day, so the convenience of being able to cook 2 times a day and have fresh food that they want to eat, that comes at the price of they need foods that is readily available. So like wheat flour, that's why there's a higher consumption because it's ready made. Also, they commented how to make like rotis and dosas and things like that. Before, it required a skill set that they no longer necessarily use on a daily basis. And also, I think part of it is the kids, because the kids want to be cool to the other kids and be like, hey, I have these biscuits, hey, I have these buns, you're eating sorghum and pearl millet. So I think that, because they said they're like, the kids don't want to eat it. The kids think it's bad to eat it.